You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Hristodoulou, and today we are taking a look at the AFC West offenses and ranking them 4 through number 1. And again, I've got to stress this because somehow people seem to still miss it. Just the offenses, not the entire teams. We'll do defenses once we wrap up the offensive side of the football for all 8 divisions here. But yes, AFC West offenses, the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Raiders. We're going through all 4 teams. We'll take a look at them, break them down, and I will organize them 4 through 1. So I invite you all to do the same in the comment section down below. Let me hear from you all. How do you rank these offenses? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Am I right on things? Am I wrong on things? Let me know in that comment section down below. I would love to discuss with you all. But starting from the very bottom, working our way up to the top here again, 4 through number 1. At the very bottom, I ultimately settled on the Las Vegas Raiders. And a big piece of that really has to do with just the amount of change that we have going on with this team and what exactly we're going to get from all of this change here. Now, obviously, Pete Carroll is now the head coach in Las Vegas, and I'm really excited to see how this works itself out. And of course, with Pete Carroll, came along with him his quarterback from Seattle, Geno Smith, making a big trade here, bringing him in, signing him to a 3-year extension or 2-year extension, whatever it was. He's there for like 3 years now. So at this point, you obviously have 2 massive changes to this team as a whole. The head coach and then the guy that's running your offense here. And I first and foremost think that Geno Smith is absolutely an upgrade for this offense going forward. There is a lot that you could maybe like or dislike about Geno Smith to this point in his career and what he did in Seattle with his basically reviving a career that everyone kind of thought was dead in the water. But here's the deal. I really like this for the Raiders, and I think this is a massive upgrade. And while you can point at some of the struggles that you may have seen from Geno Smith during his tenure in Seattle, I think there's a lot of positives, and the positives outweigh that. But the one thing that I think really needs to get discussed and does not get discussed enough, but I have seen Seahawks fans talk about it, is the lack of protection when dropping back to pass for Geno Smith while in Seattle. You can look at towards the tail end of his time there in Seattle and maybe point to just where things started to fall apart. That's all fine and dandy and fair. But if there's one thing that I need to stress, it's got to be just how poorly Seattle protected Geno Smith during his time there. And that even goes back further to the last couple of seasons, or even a large majority of the time that Russell Wilson was even in Seattle. The way I see it is, it's easy to point at a quarterback and go, well, he's hanging on to the football too long. He's not doing a good job getting rid of the football in certain situations here. Sure, maybe you can point that out in certain instances of Geno Smith's game, but when the same problem of being able to protect a quarterback goes from one quarterback to another, where that offensive line is leading the league in sacks each and every single year, and if not leading, they're like in top 3 conversation, top 5 at worst, and it's from one quarterback to another, I think you need to look a little bit less at the quarterback and more so at the offensive line that was protecting them. And for the Raiders, I really like what this offense is starting to do as far as the offensive line is concerned. I think it's a pretty solid unit here, and I don't think it's going to take a lot to protect for Geno Smith in a better way than Seattle was, considering how much they've struggled in pass protection. So I think this is a really good upgrade for the offense. And obviously, going back to what the Raiders have had basically since they got rid of Derek Carr, this is the best situation that they've had in the quarterback spot since him, and potentially even before Derek Carr, depending on how you feel about Derek Carr and his career. Beyond that, though, there are some questions, and there are some guys as well that I'm really excited about. And I think when it comes to players I'm looking forward to seeing, Brock Bowers, obviously, he basically walked into the league and might have became the best tight end in the NFL, at least as far as receiving is concerned. But he could arguably be the best tight end in the NFL already in year number 1 of his career going into year number 2. You, of course, have Jakobi Meyers. A lot of people seem to forget his name, and it's one of those things where if you don't really know about Jakobi Meyers, it's probably why. A guy that has been rock solid for the duration of his career, and I know Patriots fans all wish that he stuck around in New England, and I'm sure that there's people within the New England organization who feel the same way as well. That's a guy they probably should have never let go, and I know the Raiders have benefited from that. Jakobi Meyers, 1,000 yards last season, rock solid receiver to have. You have those two guys. And then there's a lot of question marks as far as like who else is catching the football here. I'm interested in what Jack Betch can do for this offense. And of course, you have some of the other guys that they drafted and brought in during the offseason here. Dante Thornton Jr. is one of my like favorite day 3 prospects coming out of the draft. Just his, height and speed combination there and what he could potentially do. Very interested in seeing how his tenure shakes out in Las Vegas here. And then of course, Ashton Jeanty, who without question should elevate this offense. Point blank, period. The Raiders finished last year as literally the league's worst rushing offense. Not even a conversation. And Ashton Jeanty, everyone saw what he did last year for Boise State. Unbelievable season for him. Arguably, maybe, depending on who you talk to, should have maybe won the Heisman. Not the conversation I'm trying to have, but the argument is certainly there. And then, of course, you bring in Raheem Mostert as well from Miami. This offense should look significantly better than what it did last season. The reality is, though, the AFC West, the offenses altogether are a bunch of pretty good units. And we'll get to maybe some of the opinions about that statement as we work our way through the rankings here. But I'm looking forward to what the Raiders offer this year. I do think they're going to absolutely be a better unit. The big question is, though, just how much better, and also how long does it take for them to really put those results on the football field? Those are probably the two biggest question marks here, and that's why I settle with them at number 4, because I have a little bit more trust in what we've already seen from some of the other teams that are in front of them now. Moving into the number 3 spot, and I did a little bit of juggling here, especially between 3 through 1, because I feel like I'm weighing like potential and of course like tried and true and what with when it comes to some of these offenses here, because it's a very weird group here. You have so much potential with skill guys, with quarterback in Denver, and just like what you might potentially get. And depending on whether you're looking at the Chargers, the Chiefs, or the Broncos here. So you kind of have to toe the line of, okay, this is what we know. This is what we potentially know. And, this is what I maybe expect from these guys going forward. So it was a little difficult sorting through these other 3 teams here. But I think settling at the number 3 spot with the Denver Broncos is where I want to land. And I've got to say, I'm really excited, just like I am with the Raiders, for what this offense could be in year number 2. But I do think there are 2 really big questions that this offense is going to need to have answered for them to really elevate themselves into like a premier offense. First and foremost, it's going to be the running back room. Running game was not necessarily the greatest last year in Denver, though. You go and you bring in RJ Harvey coming out of UCF in the 2nd round. He needs to be that explosive back that this offense needs to have. That's how this offense is really going to balance itself out and allow this Denver Broncos team, who has, in my eyes, one of the best defenses in the NFL right now, and become a more balanced team, and not so much we're relying on the defense to keep the score low so our offense can win us the football game here. Bo Nix blew me away, and I know blew just about everyone away last season with his play. I'm not really worried about the quarterback spot at this point here. My only real gripe with Bo Nix last season was that, and this happens with every quarterback, I should get that out there, obviously against pressure, wasn't great. Numbers fell off a cliff quite a bit, but he was also a rookie. It is what it is. Any quarterback struggles under pressure. He's a rookie. Numbers weren't great, but when he wasn't under pressure, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for a large duration of last season. This is a guy that, especially in Sean Payton's offense, it almost feels like the sky's the limit with him right now. I don't know what exactly his ceiling is. I'm not a draft guru or anything like that, or a talent evaluator, but it feels like the sky's the limit with what he could potentially do with how good he looked in year number 1 of this offense. On top of the running back conversation, though, that I had before we got into Bo Nix, the other thing that I'm really looking at here, and something that I think this offense really needs, is going to be a solidification at the tight end spot. You have not really had that in Denver for a little bit now, and obviously bringing in Evan Ingram, I think he could be that guy over the middle for this offense. Obviously great athleticism, nice size to speed, athleticism combination, mismatch, going up against linebackers or corners, depending on who it is that he's facing off with, safeties over the middle of the football field. But can he really turn into that guy? And he did have some really big flashes during his time in Jacksonville, having Trevor Lawrence throw him to football. So if him and Bo Nix can hook up and get a really good rhythm going together, there is a really good potential that this offense could really explode. And I like the wide receiver room. I like the offensive line here. Obviously, you have Cortland Sutton, really reliable wide receiver, one of the top guys in the NFL. Marvin Mims Jr. is an unbelievable deep threat for this offense. And then from there on, it's just kind of like what does the rest of this group kind of bring to the table here? I'm looking forward to seeing how Pat Bryan shakes out coming from the third round of this year's draft class. One of those guys that on the outside, standing at 6'3", being one of the taller guys coming out of this draft class here, he could do some damage for them on the outside, depending on how often he finds himself on the football field. You have obviously Troy Franklin, who has played a ton of his career with Bo Nix coming through college and now obviously in the NFL, seeing how maybe if he carves himself out a bigger role in the offense. But the way I see it right now, Denver is trending in a really good direction. And there's nothing that I really dislike about this offense right now. It's more so just what kind of production are we going to get at the two bigger question marks of this offense, being the running back room and obviously the tight end room. I like just about everything else that this offense has to offer. And the only thing that's really keeping them from being higher in this list is that Bo Nix is still just very early in his career. And the big thing, running is important. And can RJ Harvey bring balance to this offense and light up the ground game? That's kind of a big question mark to have. Yes, it's a pass-first league, but if you don't have a running game to keep defenses honest, it doesn't really matter how much you throw the football. We just watched the Philadelphia Eagles, and obviously great defense, don't get me wrong, but they ground and pounded their way to a Super Bowl victory last year. So we need to see just how good RJ Harvey can be coming in year number one and how much he can open up the offense, because if they can start to really run the football effectively, I know Sean Payton can devise an elite passing attack. We've seen what he did during his tenure in New Orleans with Drew Brees as his quarterback, so I know he can devise a great offense there. And again, my other question mark being, how does Evan Ingram fit into this all? I've seen what he can do with tight ends. I watched Jimmy Graham have unbelievable success in New Orleans as well. So listen, if these two things play out well, especially the tight end and running back situation, this is an offense to watch. Absolutely. Because again, I like the wide receiver room. I think you have two really good guys to anchor that unit there. If Evan Ingram and RJ Harvey can really step up, I feel like Bo Nix showed us a lot last year. This could be a really threatening group. And again, with one of the best defenses in the NFL, that offense is going to have plenty of opportunities to be on the football field and put themselves in positions to win. Now, moving into number 2 and number 1. This, I spent a lot of time thinking on. A lot of time. And again, going back to my point earlier of weighing potential versus what we know, and maybe even potentially regression from what we could potentially see on the Chiefs side of things, I spent a lot of time sitting on this one here. And you can point out injuries to the Chiefs offense, and maybe that hampered what they could have potentially been if everyone had stayed healthy, but it is the NFL. That's what happens. You have to adapt. As it stands right now, I think I'm going to settle with the Chiefs at the number 2 spot. Now, I will say this. The conversation of health, especially at the wide receiver room, needs to happen. Absolutely does. You're hoping that injury bug that basically tore apart the wide receiver room just stays away, and you're not sitting at the trade deadline having to trade for a veteran wide receiver who's maybe not quite making some noise on their offense anymore, and you're trying to bring them in hopes that maybe they can bring a spark like they did with DeAndre Hopkins last season. Marquise Brown basically missed the entire season. He popped up the last couple of weeks of the regular season, and obviously he was there for their playoff run, but how rusty was he? And when you're basically coming back off of a devastating injury, the way he missed the way he got hurt, it's what did you actually get from Marquise Brown? Was he really where he could have been had he played the entire season? Most likely not. Then, of course, easy to forget, Rashee Rice. 4 games in that season before he got knocked out with the ACL tear because he and Patrick Mahomes slammed into each other, and that ultimately knocked him out for the season. And Rashee Rice really looked good for this offense prior to him going down in the year prior as well. Then, of course, you have rookie Xavier Worthy, who during, I would say, the first 9 weeks of the season or so, as he was kind of getting his footing in the NFL, had his flashes, but he also had his yips, his mental errors, catching balls near the sideline with 1 foot out of bounds, going back to college day mentality type thing. You had the rookie mistakes. Once week 10 hit, and then from that point forward, you really started to see him get comfortable, and I felt like he was really starting to turn into that first-round selection that they wanted him to be. And I think that his involvement in the offense this year is only going to explode even further. And the idea of having Rashee Rice and having Marquise Brown right out of the gate in week number 1 and not losing those two guys so early in the season like they did last year could benefit him greatly. Then you look on the offensive line. I don't love that Jawan Taylor's still there at right tackle. The amount of penalties that he draws for this offense is like mind-numbing at this point here. But them going and bringing in Josh Simmons at left tackle, if he's their guy in that spot and he's good to go come week 1, and you know, maybe it takes him a couple extra weeks to get back in the fold. Like, obviously the goal is you have him there ready to go week 1. There are a lot of draft people out there who looked at Josh Simmons as left tackle number 1 in this draft if it was not for his knee injury. If he was 100% healthy, there were a lot of people, as I followed the draft process and I read the breakdowns of all these players, the amount of times I saw Josh Simmons as left tackle 1 if he's not hurt was obviously quite the thing to read, but then also to see that he landed in Kansas City. Like, how did the rest of the NFL let this thing kind of happen? Because left tackle's been a bit of a tough spot for the Chiefs for the last handful of seasons. If he ends up getting back to form, what a steal. What a steal to wrap up the first round of the draft for them. Isaiah Pacheco, he missed a ton of times, and I'm not just sitting here trying to make excuses. This is all the fact of the matter. And yes, it's the NFL season, but at this point now, we're talking about 3 skill guys that were all knocked out for large portions of last season, and the Chiefs either did not have, or how healthy were they when they finally got back, and how rusty were they when they finally got back? What could they have looked like had they not missed all this time? Like, these are all fair questions to ask. And it's easy to point at the Chiefs offense last year and go, this was not a good unit. Sure, it wasn't. Patrick Mahomes was making a lot of turnovers as well. And, you know, whether that's miscommunication or just poor throws on his part, you know, there was a lot of both. A healthy Chiefs offense with the guys that they have right now, I feel really good about. It's just a matter of, can they stay healthy? If they do, this could go back to being one of the more threatening offenses in the NFL. Injuries depleted this offense for a vast majority of last season, all the way to their Super Bowl run. Yeah, they were a lot healthier by the tail end of the season, but they were obviously not perfect. The offensive line was not in a good way. You had Joe Thuney playing left tackle in the Super Bowl. Like, injuries definitely got in the way of this team. And then, of course, if you want to throw in the Travis Kelce conversation as well, what does he end up looking like? Obviously, last season being the least productive year of his career by far. Still had nearly 100 receptions and over 800 yards receiving, but his least productive season as a pass catcher. And, you know, the Taylor Swift conversation, how distracted is he, yada, yada, yada. Like, I don't like getting into all that, but I mean, it is fair stuff to bring up. If everything goes right for this Chiefs offense, this could be one of the more devastating units, and they have a great defense to back them up. So I really like the direction that this Chiefs is heading into in this 2025 season. They just have to be healthy. And then, of course, at number 1, to wrap up the list, the Los Angeles Chargers. Imagine that. The Chargers at number 1, and I'm sure some people have been waiting for my explanation on this one here. The goal this offseason for the Chargers was to make sure that Justin Herbert had more options to work with here. It was basically the Justin Herbert to Ladd McConkey show last season, and obviously the Chargers want to avoid that. How do you do that? Well, in the second round of the draft, you go and get yourself a guy like Trey Harris, who, if you look at the numbers from last season, averaging 129 yards per game. He had 1,030 yards in just 8 games. And you look at his production, a guy that can catch passes. He can work all 3 levels of the football field. Good size, good athleticism. Like, an excellent selection for them in the second round. You pair that with the fact that in the first round, you went and got who, and this might, depending on who hears this, Omarion Hampton was my favorite running back coming out of the draft. I don't have a bias for UNC or anything like that. I have no connection to UNC other than the fact that I just love his game. Great speed and size, whether you want to call him a power back. The guy has unbelievable balance as well. He's able to continue to keep himself on his feet and work his way through tackles. His vision is great as well. In my eyes, one of the most complete backs that's come out of the draft in the last few seasons here. I really like what he can do, and I think combining him with Najee Harris, who is a perennial 1,000-yard rusher, a lot of people like to rag on Najee Harris, but the guy has literally had 1,000 yards every single season of his career, averaging about 4 yards per attempt. Not really sure where the hate comes. Maybe it's because he's not the fastest guy in the world, but that's not his game. You pair those two guys up with that receiving room now and what it could potentially be, I'm fine with the Mike Williams returning to the Chargers. He's going to be a complementary piece more than anything else, I would have to imagine. But this is an offense now that is designed to give Justin Herbert far more options and him not have to basically put the team on his back. There was a lot of reliance on the run game last season. You obviously had J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I would look at that running back room as a upgrade compared to what we had last season, or what the Chargers had last season now with Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton. If you're running the football even better than you did last year, Justin Herbert has more options to work with now in the passing game because Omarion Hampton can absolutely catch out of the backfield as well. He very much has hands to work with. I think he had a little bit over 500 yards the last couple of seasons combined catching the football. This Chargers offense can be really good. And I'm a Justin Herbert guy. I believe in what he can do. Obviously, everyone saw what happened last season at the end of the Chargers year in the playoffs. I'm not going to sit here and act like we didn't all watch that. But the Chargers offense last season was imperfect. And on top of that, a lot of it had to do with their defense and why they were in the position that they were making it to the playoffs last year. I think this offense is definitely going to open up this year. I think Trey Harris was a great fit for this offense, and the fact that they landed him in the second round after snagging Omarion Hampton in the first, the Chargers offense should be much better than last year. And we didn't even get to mention this yet, but Mekhi Becton being plugged into the interior of the offensive line coming off a Super Bowl win with the Eagles. I think Mekhi Becton found himself last year in Philadelphia, and having that year in that system over there working with that O-line, similar style of toughness that you see from Philadelphia is growing in LA under Coach Jim Harbaugh. I'm all in. I'm bought in on what the Chargers are doing here. I was pretty bought in on it last year, and clearly they needed some more options to work with in the passing game. Hopefully Trey Harris and Hampton can obviously alleviate that. I'm still not in love with the tight end room, and that's probably my biggest gripe, and not a bad place to be, where my biggest gripe of an offense is the tight end room. Listen, Will Dissly has had his moments. I don't think he's a legit tight end one. Tyler Conklin is an intriguing pickup for them. We'll see what happens with him there. That's probably my biggest issue, is just the tight end room is not nearly as dynamic as I would like it to be. But this is an offense that is more willing to run the football than most others, so I do think you can get away with that a little bit. And again, you're relying on your two receivers now in Trey Harris and in Ladd McConkey to kind of open things up in the passing game. Mike Williams, with the experience he has. I like what the Chargers are brewing over here. I'm a big fan of the coaching style of Jim Harbaugh, and I think this Chargers team is poised to take a step forward next year. This is going to be a pretty good offense, and if they're not one of the best in the NFL, I'd be pretty surprised. But if I had to just make a prediction off the top of my head here, they're probably within like the top 10 of the NFL by the end of the season in totality. I think the Chargers have a ton of potential this next season, and I think things are going to really open up. And a lot of that has to do with that ground game getting even better than it was last year, and off the back of what was a really tough defense as well. I think, just like I said with the Broncos earlier, they're going to be a team that's going to have plenty of opportunities to work offensively because that defense is putting them in great positions to succeed. But those are my rankings for the AFC West. Let me know in the comment section down below. Thoughts, opinions, what am I right, wrong about? Let me know. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.